Welcome back to Expat. Here is part two of the Danish Deception. Unbeknownst to her, he was also borrowing money from friends, and he was borrowing money from family members, from friends, even someone, a very wealthy business guy who was going to mentor him for for not for free, and he still borrowed and ended up gambling all of the money away. Um, as mentioned, they got married, and she continued to help him financially after the marriage. She kept thinking they were a team, and he just kept borrowing. He kept telling and gambling it all away. She mentioned some of the websites he was on were just like random websites, and he had a really, really bad addiction. um, I added, I mean, she never mentioned it was 500,000, but as she was talking, and I was just adding this up, and and I think one other person took note of it. I didn't see anyone else mentioning this figure. It was when I added all of what she mentioned up. It was about five. It was about 500,000, and it could have. I suspect it was probably a little more, but maybe there was some embarrassment. Being embarrassed about giving this man all of this money. And I must give this to this young lady. I mean, she came out. She's sharing her story. People are just. It went viral, and it went viral um, for reasons. I think many were comparing it to the Tender Swindler. Um, and she made like I think it was 24 or 25 part series with this. So with each week that she was, I guess maybe every other day, she was making this series. It just got more and more and more traction, and everyone was comparing it to this. But this was really a romance gone wrong. Um, so there's another thing that I want to touch culturally that, as mentioned, I do believe that the only error that she had made was diving into this too deep with little cultural awareness of how it really is. She also, he was taking her in the beginning of the marriage, and also in their as he was courting her in the beginning when they first met on this shopping spree and that sort of thing. And that's something also culturally doesn't really exist in Northern Europe like that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it rarely happens, even if the man is if he's very wealthy. uh, Perhaps one would be able to kind of enjoy, um, you know, where he lives or wherever, maybe being in his car, uh, dinners, and that sort of thing. Um, but in terms of generosity, it is not like in Anglo-Saxon culture. Let's put it that way. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen on a level of these lavish shopping sprees in Monaco. Um, so he was definitely love bombing, and I just wish, as she was going through this, I just kept saying, oh, I just wish I had known her. I wish I wish I had known her. I would have just said, just be still and reflect, and so on. But anyway, I was wondering why this went viral. And besides like the several different series that she made, I think a lot of people are talking about it because it's really a romance gone wrong, and they are, you have the scam involved. People are comparing it to the Tinder swindler. Um, Many who watch also were saying that, that, I mean, she was motivation to others. Um, and there are many that have had issues or dealing with narcissist partners. She was motivating to those people. There are many women that have gone through financial manipulation and emotional manipulation. And I think when you come from a culture, for example, like from the US, where as children we're taught, you will, every young girl is taught it in stories that you have this wonderful, beautiful, wonderful prince that would just rescue us. Um, Rescue us and protect us and all of that. And so I think, deep down, subconsciously, many young people, many young women have this. And she mentioned several times that she felt so protected, so protected. That feeling of protection is, I actually, and I'm going to say this, and I know it might be a little controversial in a way, but I'm going to say it anyway, because of how the society in Northern Europe is structured, particularly like in Denmark and those places is structured. That feeling of, of of this man like wanting to protect you, and you feeling like just a little person like under the protection of this very masculine figure, this man seldom also exists. um, Very seldom exists. You might be surprised. I mean, it's changing somewhat with these kind of manosphere kind of movements. However, uh, many of the men, are to some extent even passive. And in some cases, the women are very strong and very independent. Both parties are very independent. So that concept, after maybe a young little girl, disappears uh, within the dating culture in Northern European societies, if that makes sense. So that kind of thing continue within Anglo-Saxon cultures of, just finding your wonderful prince and feeling protected by this person, and the family being protected, and he is just, he's the person to protect the domain and the family and protect you and all of this starts. It's not so in Northern Europe to the same extent as in the US. I know I'm going to burst a lot of your bubbles, many of you that have this picture of this is how it is in dating a European man. You're going to, there are going to be a lot of surprises. So anyway, I also believe, and so many people are shocked by this, that he turned out to really just be looking out for himself. And, anyway, so I also was thinking that this probably went viral on social media. I know it was on Reddit, and there are some people that are, they are an interracial relationship, but I don't think that the situation has anything to do with that. I think it's really very unfortunate that many are, they're saying that it had to do with the fact that he was of another race, and she felt like letting her guards down, and that sort of thing. I don't think it has to do with that. I really do think that it has to do with her limited knowledge of Northern European dating culture and partnering culture. And I also think it had to do with the fact that she just is young and is not very experienced with dating. So it doesn't have anything to do with, I don't think it has anything to do with any kind of white worship, as people are saying. It has to do with a young woman that is vulnerable and that was trusting. And as mentioned, it can happen to many young women. And it has happened to many people, even a lot of the people that he scammed. Many of these people have businesses, and he still was able to get over on 60-year-old, 40-something-year-old husbands and wives, uh, older people, younger people. So he was absolutely good at what he did at this. In some cases, I think there might be some issues of not just being a narcissist, but maybe some socio and psychopath kind of traits. But I would be interested to hear a psychologist and psychiatrist look into that. So, they are, as mentioned, there's that racial component. There are also cultural and psychological dimensions to it. And he had love bombed her, and anyone would be able to see that. And the cultural and psychological dimension, other than her not being familiar with with the dating culture, that sort of thing. As I mentioned before, that you have this kind of fairy tale kind of dream, romance that many young women in Anglo-Saxon cultures are taught. Meeting this wonderful prince, this guy is wealthy enough to take care and protect her, that sort of thing. And he presented himself as such. It raises some question. That being said, and I want to give her a lot of grace with this. And I so appreciate her coming forward with this. These guys need to be on blast. They are all over in Europe. You should be aware of this. Even I never fell for his scam, but there was one person that had approached me when I was single many years ago with exactly the same. He actually said he was somewhat similar, we had similar profession, but the profession at the time that I was doing was very niche. So he said somewhat similar, but then he also said his family was in the same business as my family. So, he was already kind of putting himself very, having similar interests and he appeared to have similar values to me. And as she had described, I mean, he was, in my case, this person was older, but he also said he said he went to the Olympics as well. But in my case, the person had said he did rowing, so that's what he had gotten his medals in. It was in rowing. And he just happened to have been, and I met him at a restaurant, and he just happened to have had some information on a newspaper clipping about his medals. And I was like, wow, at the time I thought that was strange. Why would anyone carry that around? But he just happened to have had it. So yes, he was tall and he was handsome. He said his family were like in the top 1% of the society in terms of wealth. And the family business was the same family business that my family was in. But if my family didn't have, it was not, I wasn't raised with a 1% family. I was raised in a upper middle class, to middle class family, but they were in the 1% with the business, he said. And this one that tried to scam me, I think he's like 6'3". So, I mean, really, really, really handsome man, well built, and just, and then we went out, and by the third date, he started to act. He told me he was doing a real estate deal, And he said there was so much equity in the deal, and he wanted to know if I would be willing to invest 40,000 in the deal. And I said to him, no. I said no. And she was telling that story. I wondered if this is not, and I might actually reach out to her because this would be very interesting. But I'm wondering if this is not a group working together in Northern Europe, because the story, my story was quite similar to that. However, I was much older. I had dated. I was more experienced dated. I've been in Europe for many, many, many years. So I was familiar with that. And prior to moving here, I vacationed and stayed here a lot. And I have, a lot of people and extended family members here. So, um, so this was, it's somewhat similar. So there is a cultural and psychological dimension. What these guys tend to do, and in my case also, um, that never became a scam because I shut that down very quickly. He also, particularly, he focused on dating women of foreign backgrounds. The one that had approached me. Um, and in her case, I don't know, but that one also had a Danish girlfriend. But it is likely that I think the Danish girlfriend had lost some money with him, and his family also had lost some money, but by no means, I mean, he just went in with this American woman, and a lot of it had to do with, you know, um, her not being aware of those cultural differences, that she doesn't have to catch um, her man or even her partner, because as a Danish guy, most Danish men would not expect their wives to do that. Um, but anyway, it's a cautionary tale, and it's a cautionary tale, and I just hope that many will learn from this. There were some red flags. As I said, I would like to give her a lot of grace with this. There are many that are saying, well, why didn't she Google him? Chances are, I mean, if she had Googled him, I don't think anything would have really come up. These scammers, they try to anything that would leave any kind of a digital footprint that's negative, they get that removed. In my case, I remember with this person, I had Googled him, and I didn't see anything about what he had said about him being, in the Olympics, or anything about his family. Um, One guy I had, years ago when I was single, that I had dated, he did mention to me that he is related to the royal family. Um, I did Google him, and I don't know if he was related, but I saw that his father was a top musician, classical musician here, and he did mention that he came from he was his family were well to do. Um, they were lacking love, according to him, but they were well to do, and it appeared that his kind of panned out. I'm not sure if he had any kind of royal lineage, but at least that part of it, that he was likely from an upper to well-to-do family, kind of. But the other one that told me about his, the 1%, there was nothing about his family, and that asked for 40,000 for a real estate deal. Um, so even if she had Googled him, I'm not sure if anything would have come up. Others are arguing that he was abusive and manipulative enough, and she should have just walked off. But for someone that is young, that sort of thing, and her first relationship, it probably was very hard for her to do. I do agree as well that she probably should have walked off, but it appeared she didn't share what was going on with her family members. And so, she was he isolated her, and she was emotionally even more vulnerable. Um, so I do some of the red flags that I would actually say that one would need to look out for, particularly if you are dating someone from overseas and you're not too familiar with the culture. Of course, you should speak to people that are on the ground, with people, people that are somewhat familiar with the culture. Um, in the kind of coaching that I do, as mentioned, even after, in the future, after a certain amount of sessions, you are still allowed to ask questions. There is still some level of support, email support or something like that. So, and you are allowed to also come in. You're invited on a regular basis to group sessions as well. So just throw the questions out, and uh, someone will give you really good feedback. So, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. He presented himself, as I said, he had all of these multiple grand, improbable identities, I would actually say. And if someone is saying that, that they're a prince, also an Olympian, successful tech pro, had all of these homes and all of that, probably it might have been best, even if you do not, if he did not have a digital footprint, perhaps to use some kind of private investigator to look more into it. There is a couple that he had borrowed money from. I think it was like almost 200,000, and they eventually, after a while, looked into it and found out that all of the stuff he was saying was not true. So I would say that that would be the first thing to really, um, to judge. Not to really judge, but to have a pause in if someone is having all of these multiple grand, improbable kind of identities. Now, also, if you are dating someone overseas and even locally, be careful with the love bombing. One of the things that I noticed, that again, this had to do with the lack of awareness of the culture that he's from. There is more, in the US, I believe in Canada, it's becoming more so here in some of the cities, whereby people date, and they date multiple people until they decide to go, quote unquote, steady. However, I suspect this guy might have been in his late 30s, and he love bombed her. And one of the things that she also had said is that he never even like said, like, let's go steady. It was just a nice, beautiful transition into like this serious, amazing relationship. Um, and someone within that age group in Northern Europe and even in Southern Europe, that's how it often will happen. Um, the dating culture of dating multiple partners is not, it's a new thing. But someone from a smaller area, they tend to become serious a lot faster. So I noticed she was looking at that as he must really, really adore me, and I am really special to him. In the meanwhile, that was a part of his dating culture. They wanted to spend a lot of time with you, the love bombing, um, him just focusing on her is it's what's a part of his culture. He showered her with affection, with the attention, and the big promises is not a part of the culture. However, the affection, the attention, and wanting to spend as much time is a part of the culture. So, um, I know a lot of Americans would say that, well, maybe that was a red flag, but as I said, it's really a part of the culture. And she fell for that, and a lot of that may have to do with the lack of awareness. The whirlwind romance, yes, that also. I think she should have had some pause with that, particularly after he started to ask for money and always wanted to take her on vacation. I suspect he was using her money to take her on these lavish vacations, but that's just what I think. Um, he asked for temporary loans. And again, that is very unusual. It doesn't really happen in relationships. Usually, when there are a lot of hardships, people kind of go their separate ways. I don't really support that. I do believe in this concept of a wonderful partnership, but I'm also aware that that is not highly probable in terms of within the cultures here. So one still have to have that awareness that you don't want to be taken advantage of because they are not going to allow you to take advantage of them. Um, but in this case, he made a lot of excuses. The amounts continued to escalate. It started to involve friends, which he was not aware of, but it did. And I could tell you that this guy was a sociopath because um, uh, people in Northern Europe, they very seldom ask uh, family members, they seldom ask their friends to help to help them financially. It almost never happens. So, and he was asking for like really large sums. Um, yeah, one of the things that I would actually say that I wish she had kind of reflected on earlier was the inconsistencies in his stories, because that to me that was a big red flag. Um, but as mentioned, the pressure, the guilt, the emotional manipulation, that was quite a lot. He also isolated her from friends and using marriage as a security for him, and for her, she viewed it as a partnership. So there are many, many, many levels to this, and I just hope, I really, really do hope that she will be able to, that she is as strong as she said she is emotionally, but she is in counseling. And I do hope that she, will be able to get through this. If you meet someone, verify, 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 never give money, particularly in vulnerable stages. Pay attention to the inconsistencies and please run background checks.
Okay, so actually, I have to conclude the video here. I did have like another 2 minutes left of this, but I have to cut the recording time. And at this time, I would like to wish you a happy holidays, wish you a great week. And I think I would like to review this, or for us to have a discussion on this, or to make myself available to you if you have any questions. I'm going to likely discuss this live after the holidays in about a week or so. And yeah, or just send me your questions if you happen to be having one of those whirlwind international romances. So, romance. So, happy holidays to everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And let's tend to each other, be kind to each other, send positive energy to that young lady. Thank you for tuning in to Expat. If you have any questions, please send me an email at info@omexpat.com. Bye bye.